This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Gall, Candidate Relations Specialist for the SOA. Today, I am talking with the SOA Chair of the Joint Committee for Inclusion, Equity, and Diversity, or JC, Sarah Tepema, and the SOA Member Chair for Career Encouragement, a working group of the JC, Alex Knight. Thank you for joining me today, Sarah and Alex.
Thanks for having us.
We've worked together for a few years now on diversity and inclusion efforts for the SOA and to encourage a more diverse actuarial profession. I'm happy to say that the conversation around diversity and inclusion issues is happening a lot more often, but obviously there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So why don't we get started today, just having a little bit of conversation about diversity and inclusion and equity. Sarah, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your work on our diversity efforts?
Sure. So I'm a board member of the SOA, and I'm in the second year of my board term right now. I have been the leader, the board assigns a leader for diversity and inclusion, and I've been that person since I started on the board almost 2 years ago. Last year, as we were working through all of our priorities, one of the things we realized is that it would be great to join forces with the Casualty Actuarial Society, or CAS. And so we've formed a joint committee, the JCIED, which is the CAS and SOA strategy for diversity. And so we've got a lot of balls in the air with the JC, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes. One of the things that the JC did was to bring the career encouragement work group under its I guess umbrella. And Alex is the work group chair on the SOA side for that work group, and they've been in place for several years. But they are probably the furthest along in terms of our work groups and doing great stuff. The other two groups and work streams that we have going are a work stream for professional development and then a work stream for leadership development. And again, all of those are different phases, working on different things. But this was enabling us to have sort of a broader strategy, focusing kind of on early career, and making sure we are getting the word out through professional development, and then also trying to build leaders who are diverse and inclusive in the future for the profession.
Great. And Alex, so as Sarah mentioned, you've been involved with career encouragement for multiple years now. Why did you decide to get involved?
So I'm originally from the Caribbean, from the country called Trinidad and Tobago, and where I'm from, it's a pretty diverse population in that about 40% of are from descendants from Africa, another 40% of descendants from India, then the remaining 20% are people who are of mixed ethnicities, or Chinese or Syrian or white. There's a whole melting pot of people in Trinidad and Tobago. So where I'm from, the people who are in charge, the leaders, people who hold the power, teachers everywhere that you look, they look like me, or they look like they're from India, right? So when I migrated to the U.S. Back in 2005, and I started taking actual exams, I would walk into the workplace and I'll look around. I'd walk into exam centers and I'll look around, and people might even look at me at exam centers. I'll go to exam seminars and I'll look around, and I see very few people that look like me, if any at all. So when I was done with all my actual exams back in 2011, I was just thinking, like, what's next for me? I'm done with the exams. How can I, help my profession? And becoming a part of this just seemed like a natural thing for me to do, as a natural next step. So that's the reason why I got involved.
Great. So let's broaden out the topic just a little bit. Why is diversity and inclusion important to the growth of the actuarial profession? And maybe we should actually back up a little bit and talk about the difference between diversity and inclusion and even equity. So Sarah, did you want to start with that?
Sure. So, I always think of the analogy of the conference room table. In the past, the conference room table was filled with people who looked exactly alike and thought exactly alike and made decisions in the same way. And then we've added we had diversity around for a while, and diversity is, okay, now we maybe have different people at the table who look a little different or maybe think a little different. I think the next step we talk about in more recent years was inclusion, which is, okay, yes, people are sitting at the table, but they may not have a voice or may not be invited to speak. And I think that word invitation is key. And so inclusion is really bringing those folks into the conversation and inviting their opinions. When we formed the committee, the joint committee last year, we added the word equity. Equity is really the concept of people having the opportunity to get anywhere near that conference table in the first place. So if you can't get anywhere near it, it's not going to matter whether it's diverse or inclusive. There just aren't enough people who can get near it. And so we've decided to add equity into the mix. And so I think in terms of the future of the profession, first of all, we know that our younger members and our candidates really care about this and want to have diverse teams, and they want to see an inclusive profession. They want to belong. The other thing is they're diverse, much more than in the past. And so they want to feel like they have a sense of belonging to the profession and that their voice is heard and they're included. So to me, it's absolutely crucial that we address this. And it's not just a check the box thing. It's something that needs to be woven into every single thing that we do at our jobs and as volunteers for the SOA. And in really everything we do. It's not just something that you do on the side. It's something that needs to be part of every discussion and every strategy.
And just to talk a little bit about inclusion, just personally speaking, just being a part of this profession for the past 15 years or so. Yes, I'm there. I've accepted the invitation, but not at every occasion did I always feel, as part of the party. Yeah, I got invited to the party, but am I actually enjoying this party? And over the years, things have improved, and I think that each person needs to just focus on being intentional about helping others feel welcomed when somebody different from you comes into the door. I think there's some intentionality that each person, including myself, because there are people who are different to me, who would walk into the door, just making everyone feel welcome and being a part of the team and being a part of the organization.
Yeah,
that's a great point, Alex.
So talking a little bit more about that, what do you think individuals can do, either on a team basis or volunteering, to promote inclusion in their work? How can they help make people feel more included?
So one of the things I would say is, so at least from my personal experience, it seems as if people fear what they don't know. And so because they fear what they don't know, they tend to avoid conversations or avoid contact, right? So what I believe can help with that is something as simple as Google. You know somebody's from a particular place or a particular country, a particular state, or have certain ethnicity. Just Google a few facts about it, and try to just have a regular conversation with that individual, and just try to develop the rapport, develop some sort of camaraderie with individuals that are different from you. So something as simple as being intentional and just doing a quick Google search on different items about individuals or in the workplace or anywhere else. I mean, it could be outside the workplace as well. Whatever, if you're in some social clubs or a church or volunteer organization, just look for some information about different people and just have conversations with them. Say, hey, I heard about this or I read about this. Can you tell me more about it? So that's a way people can intentionally help others feel included.
Yeah, everybody loves to be asked about their background, and people like to talk about themselves, so use it.
Yeah. So thinking of the ideas of diversity and inclusion in teams, let's talk a little bit about recruiting, whether it's recruiting for a volunteer position or recruiting for a new opening in your team. Any advice on what people should think about or do when recruiting for those positions?
So do you want to go first, or should I?
Sure. I'll talk a little bit about kind of during work and volunteerism, if you could talk about recruiting new candidates. But you know, I think one of the things that we tend to do, and I'm thinking in terms of volunteering or even meetings at my, you know, at work, you tend to think, if someone says, oh, we need someone to work on this, or we need a new committee member, or we need a speaker, and we tend to go right to the person we know who did it right the last time. And that person is very likely to look just like me and think just like me and make decisions just like me. And if I go to that person every time, nothing, you know, we're not enriching that discussion. We're not broadening our horizons. We're not learning anything new. And so I think what you really have to do is stop yourself and say, you know, check yourself when you do that. It's that sort of fast brain, slow brain thing, and pause and just say, you know, what could make this a better discussion? What could make this a more enriched product or a more thoughtful exercise? How can we, you know, learn more in this process? And who would we want to invite to the table to have that discussion? And go out of your comfort zone a little bit. It might mean taking a few risks and bringing on someone you don't know that well. But it's most likely going to be worth the risk, and you'll have a richer discussion, and you'll have a lot more to gain by taking that risk. So I would say get in the habit and build a practice around pausing, and before you go right to the person you always know. And I'm as guilty of it as anybody, but I've also found that when I've paused and gone to somebody new, I have been so excited and pleased to find the result and how much better it was because of it.
So just to touch on the recruiting aspect, I believe that employers, they need to be intentional. Because you've been going to the same school over and over again, it does not mean you need to just continue looking at that same university, that same campus over and over again. If over the years you realize that, even anecdotally, that you get similar candidates over the past 10, 12 years of recruiting at the same school. Okay, so your company more than likely will have some kind of D&I strategy. You don't necessarily have to wait until the powers that be say, hey, let's be more inclusive, let's be more diverse in recruiting. You on your own and at your location can say, you know what, I realize that we've been going to the same school, and generally speaking, we've been having similar type candidates over the year. Let's open it up a little bit. Let's look at other schools. Let's look at organizations that target the underrepresented groups. Let's look at more online resumes. So don't necessarily wait until there's some directive up top that says, hey, we are doing this and we're going to do this now. Go ahead and hand up your own self. Take a look at your department, see how things are going, and try to make that change.
I love that idea. Just that you have the power personally to do it is, I think, great. So Sarah, you had mentioned a little bit earlier about diversity and inclusion should be included in all business decisions, not just recruiting, not just, volunteering. Why do you say it should be in all business decisions?
Well, so, we've been hearing a lot about innovation and, we need to be more innovative, and especially the actuarial profession. We're looking at things like, we're kind of challenged by InsurTech and AI and data science and all of these things that are very innovative. And so we know too from the research that innovation absolutely requires, diverse and inclusive teams. And you will not have a good product if you are not consumer centric and thinking about the diversity of your consumer once you've built a product. And I love this example. I've used it before, but Apple, which of course is one of the most innovative companies ever, ran into an issue a few years ago when they developed Apple Health, and they had a team of developers building up the Apple Health app. And this was going to be your one-stop shop for all of your health needs. This wonderful app, which it is pretty cool. But the one thing that's very interesting is when it was released, they realized that they had a huge gap to the tune of 100 million people. Yes, 100 million people, which are women who track their menstrual periods on their phone. Literally 100 million women track their menstrual periods on their phone, and they did not include a period tracker as part of the Apple Health app. And I know ask any woman, they probably have a period tracker app on their phone. It might be Apple Health or another one, but and so to me that was a huge miss, right? How could you not have, if there was a woman between the ages of 15 and 55, more than likely they would have figured out that that should be part of it. So I look at that example as a pretty interesting you know, reason to just make sure that you have a diverse and inclusive team when you are developing something new. And it's not just product development, it's really every decision, every committee needs to have that diversity of thought around the table when you're making decisions.
Agreed. So we are almost out of time, but any final thoughts that you want people to think about or consider going forward?
So I'll go first if that's okay, Sarah. So I just want to encourage folks, those of you who are already in the workplace, just to be more intentional. Be intentional. Take a look at yourselves. I take a look at myself periodically. Are there any gaps? Is there anything that I can do to help my team members, my coworkers feel more welcomed? So, and just, as I suggested earlier on, just try to find out a little bit about people. You could go on LinkedIn or you can go to Google, see what schools they went to, and just have conversations with folks. And that in and of itself will go a very, very long way in people feeling included. In addition to that, I mentioned earlier on recruiting. Be intentional in recruiting. Be honest. Is there an issue at my workplace when it comes to recruiting? And then, try to do something about it. And you can also reach out to the SOA as well. Like, hey, do you guys have any ideas or anyone we can talk to, to help us, have a more inclusive and diverse recruiting strategy. So, in short, I want everyone to just be intentional and honest with themselves.
Sarah, anything else to add?
I mean, that's awesome. And I love that concept of intentionality, Alex. It's so true. And I think to go along with that, we should all make sure as we're being intentional, we're also checking ourselves and pausing, maybe checking our biases, but pausing before we think about who would be the good person to add to a team or who would be helpful in making a decision, and think more broadly than your usual, the usual places you go and the usual people you call on. It's part of that whole intentionality, which I just love.
I think that's a great note to end on. So thank you, Sarah and Alex, for joining me today. It's very much appreciated. And thanks for everybody for watching this video. So if you have questions, as Alex mentioned, feel free to reach out. The JSEED is always willing to help out. I'm sure Sarah and Alex and I are more than willing to answer any questions. Feel free to look us up. Otherwise, there is a diversity and inclusion page on the SOA site. Just search diversity inclusion in the SOA search and you'll find articles, you'll find resources available to help you. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us today and have a great day. Thank you guys again.
Thanks, Beth. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Beth, and thanks for everybody for listening. And we would love to hear your comments and thoughts, so please pass them along.
Great. Have a great day.